Southern California. We were thought about, and I teamed up with him and we worked out together for about 4 years. I had an apartment a couple blocks away from his, and he'd come over and I'd ride to the gym with him. It was very methodical. We always show up on time. We worked out really hard. He was very focused. Of course, I was too, and so, he was a great training partner.
By that time, Frank had started to establish himself in California, training with the likes of Arnold, Franco Columbu, and Ed Corn, among others. His previous victories also caught the attention of Joe Weider. Impressed with his physique, Joe began to pay him for articles, photo shoots, and endorsements. Unlike Arnold, Frank never classed himself as a Weider athlete. However, he still took Joe's advice about posing and training.
So in 1969, I competed in Mr. World and won that. And then in 1970, I went to Nava Universe and won Amateur Universe, Arnold won Pro Universe, and my wife won Miss Universe Bikini. And then 1971, I trained the summer in South Africa and then went up to London to compete. And I was in great shape, but Bill Pearl won that. He was their favorite.
You were in outstanding shape in that one. That was probably, up until that time, that was probably your best condition to date, right?
It was. And, Bill was the legend in London, and they're so enamored with Bill that they didn't even compare us. I won my class, he won his class, and they just gave it to him. He posed good, but, he had a lot of flaws. I learned something from Pearl in that contest. I was sitting right in front of the judges for the pre-judging when there was Bill Pearl, Dave Draper, Sergio Oliva, Rich Park. He was supposed to turn right and show his right side, but Bill turned left and never showed his right side. And one of the judges said to him, "Bill, it's quarter turn to the right, not the left." Right? He ignored it. And the judge said again, "Bill, come on, quarter turn to the right, not the left." And Bill looked at him and says, "Don't be difficult." And they let it pass. And I realized at that time that, when you're favored, you can get away with stuff like that. With all that knowledge I picked up in 71 by not winning, 1972 I went there and won Professional Miss Universe. The next day, we went to Essen, Germany to compete my first Mr. Olympia. I didn't do very well in that at all.
I mean, you got 4th place there.
I mean, it was Arnold's contest in Essen, Germany. He didn't deserve it. Sergio should have won. Oh yeah, he was in great shape. But Arnold was a month out. But, they gave it to him because it was in Germany.
In 73, you were traveling a lot, right? You were doing exhibitions.
Yeah, I did a lot of exhibitions that next year, so I competed. Then 74, in the Olympia that year, was in Madison Square Garden. There was only 4 guys in it. Arnold and Lou Ferrigno in the tall class, and me and Columbu in the shorter class.
Although there were only 4 competitors, there were, for the first time, 2 weight classes, under 200 pounds and over 200 pounds. Frank was in fantastic shape that year, and he and Franco posed for the judges side by side at the prejudging. The conundrum was obvious. Here were 2 polar opposite physiques, one thick and massive, and the other lean and symmetrical. Eventually, the judge's decision was based on their personal preferences.
And he beat me there. Of course, I didn't think he should. I was so surprised that he did. I mean, I like Franco and everything, but he wasn't fair. He wasn't a fair competitor. He would do things to sabotage my posing. I remember.
When did I put you up there?
Control booth, and he took the needle off my record and scratched it when I was posing.
Frank went back to training in preparation for the Olympia of 1975, a year that was going to be pivotal in the history of bodybuilding, but one of the worst in his career.
Using the right weight matters. The body pod lets you easily understand what is the fastest way to reach your health and fitness goals. At an accuracy of 98%, you can measure 45 different body metrics and understand which areas you need to work on. Easily see if you're losing the right weight or if you're gaining muscle. Get powerful insights to understand how different diets and daily habits impact your overall health. Make smarter health choices today. The Body Pod by Hume.
That began 5 years earlier, with legendary challengers establishing themselves as true threats to his burgeoning dynasty. The 1975 Olympia made for a very compelling storyline, as a full camera crew was on hand to document the entire thing for the soon-to-be legendary film, Pumping Iron.
They were filming Pumping Iron in Gold's Gym, and I said, "Boy, this is a mad over here." I said, why don't you just call the movie Pumping Arnold? Because it's all about him. It's not about the history of it is. It's always like this. I went over to Vince's gym to train with it while they were filming in Gold's Gym. It was sort of really upsetting there. It was like you couldn't train because they're always there with the cameras and getting in the way, and I was more interested in working out than being part of that. And 1975 wasn't a really good year for me. I competed in the Olympiad. I really shouldn't even gone to that. It was in South Africa. It's one of those contests where I really wasn't ready for it. My schedule was sort of upended. My teaching situation really wasn't firm, and there was other things happening and moving and things like that. And I really wasn't in that great a shape. I was actually embarrassed by it. I was so embarrassed when I saw it on TV.
Frank's smooth conditioning and size, which was smaller than usual, landed him in 4th place in the under 200-pound class behind Franco Columbo, Ed Corney, and Albert Beckles.
I think it was just me and Franco. I wasn't that great a shape for it, neither was he. And I remember him telling me, he said, next year I get them all by the neck. And so in 76, he was in better shape. And he did get them got me by the neck. So after I saw the results of the 75 Olympia and what I looked like, I really was sort of angry. I made up for it after that. Basically, in 1976 in February, I went back to New York and we did a guest posing at Whitney Museum, Arnold, Ed Corney, and myself. That was the start of it. After that, I just kept training really hard, moved into a new condominium in Santa Monica and really had a great training situation. And I got in the best shape of my life up to that point.
It was here that Frank and Joe Weider began to differ in their philosophy. Joe was very much a size guy. He preferred and demanded freakishness in his top bodybuilders. Yes, they needed to be lean, but they had to be large and muscular above all else. Frank's reputation for symmetry and proportion was already well established, and he didn't share Joe's thoughts. His commitment to symmetry and aesthetics eventually paid off, but not before hitting one last road bump. For the first time in 6 years, the Mr. Olympia would have a new champion in 1976 after Arnold announced his retirement from competing, for the time being at least. This year, he was promoting the contest with his partner, Jim Lorimer, in Columbus, Ohio. The contest was wide open, but Franco Columbo was the odds-on favorite to win it this year after placing second to Arnold for the last 3 years. He had steadily improved his physique each year leading up to 1976, but the experts felt like he would be the new Mr. Olympia after the dust settled. After his disappointing 3rd place last year, Lou Ferrigno decided to take his chances at a career in professional football. He tried out for the New York Giants and the Toronto Argonauts, and was absent from this year's contest. Another name that didn't make it was previous year's 2nd place winner Serge Nubret, who was suspended for his alleged starring in adult movies in France and wasn't allowed to compete. Despite these absences, Arnold and Lorimer were determined to make their first promotion of Mr. Olympia a raging success. Arnold invited the top professional bodybuilders in the world, including Ed Corney, Bill Grant, and 3 times NABBA Mr. Universe winner Boyer Coe, who was making his Olympia debut. Frank Zane, however, was the wildcard entry in this year's contest, displaying an aesthetic physique that surpassed anything the fans had seen from him before. As contestants began to line up on stage in the under 200 pounds class, it soon became apparent that the real contest was between Franco Columbo and Frank Zane. Franco came in even thicker than the year before and displayed excellent definition and muscularity. Frank, in contrast, was lean, symmetrical, extremely muscular, and ripped. Franco had the momentum going for him after placing second to Arnold the last 3 years, but Frank was really in amazing shape. It was a tight battle, but eventually the thick Columbo beat the aesthetic Zane by only half a point. He also took the overall title and went on to become the first Mr. Olympia winner under 200 pounds. He retired from bodybuilding after this contest due to an injury at the world's strongest competition, where he tore nearly every tendon and ligament surrounding his left knee. With Franco now out of the picture, Frank vowed that 1977 was going to be the year of Zane.
That's what I'm saying. Sunday's the only day named after a food.
We are not doing this all season.
Just saying.
You can't possibly believe that the entire sport of football was created.
After last year's close win, few doubted that Olympia glory was on the cards for Frank. For many, he wasn't a second best. He was the heir apparent. Spurred on by his narrow loss to Franco, he was like a man possessed in training. One of the reasons Franco got the nod last year was his superior leg development, something that Frank lacked due to his move to Vince Gironda's gym prior to the contest. But his training schedule for the 77 contest spoke of his desire to finally remove any question marks surrounding his physique.
I think that maybe I would have had better legs if I was staying at Colts because he had equipment. Vince didn't really have it.
He was determined to make 1977 his year. As a proponent of positive thinking and self-affirmations, Frank knew that he needed to manifest his destiny of winning the Olympia in his mind and in others long before the actual event happened on stage.
So you did that, right, Frank? You repeated 1,000,000 times that year that you were going to be Mr. Olympia?
Yeah.
77?
I did.
Yeah. 3,000 times a day or something?
Just about, yeah. I learned that the secret to winning was to win it ahead of time. I had an ad in the Reader magazine. Basically, it said 1977, the year of Zane. So I put it in people's mind that I was going to be the winner. They needed to know that, so I told them.
However, a new favorite was emerging. One that many consider to be the most exciting bodybuilder to come along since Arnold.
Our next performer, very, very strong possibilities. Robert Robinson from Tallahassee, Florida. There is 205 pounds of great muscle.
Since his debut with the IFBB only 2 short years earlier, Robbie Robinson had won the IFBB Mr. America, Mr. World, Mr. International, and Mr. Universe. As the 1977 Mr. Olympia got closer, he seemed to get bigger, more ripped, and more invincible each month. By the time he guest posed on the AAU Mr. America contest in July, unbelievably massive, his perfectly shaped body was bursting with muscle. After taking a year off to try his luck at playing professional football, the 25-year-old Lou Ferrigno was making a comeback this year. At 6'5", he was planning on being much bigger than he was in 1975, and by the summer of 77, he was looking better than ever, and many fans were anticipating a Ferrigno-Robinson showdown for the title that October. Unfortunately for fans, Lou got an offer from CBS 1 month before the Olympia to star in The Incredible Hulk. Lou would have to sit out the contest and wait until next year. Being prominently featured as Arnold's training partner in the legendary Pumping Iron film that came out in January, and his increased popularity gave Ed Corney the motivation he needed to show up at his best in this year's contest. Another challenger that was planning on making shockwaves this year was Ken Waller, who won the over 200-pound class 1 year earlier before losing the overall title to Franco. Realizing the size of the competition, he trained for the contest all year long, in contrast to his normal 3 months. And with other names like AAU Mr. America and NAVA Mr. Universe winner Dennis Tinerino, who was making his Olympia debut, Boyer Coe, who was competing in his second Olympia, Albert Beckles, Roger Walker, and his opponent, Frank was going to have his hands full holding off these hungry contenders.
Hello, I'm Bobby Eddy, and we're in Columbus, Ohio for the Mr. Olympia contest. 4,000 people there, a complete sellout here at Veterans Memorial Auditorium. This has been sold out for over a month and a half.
One of the top favorites for this year's championship is Frank Zane. 5'9", 35 years old, 199 pounds. A math teacher from California.
Eventually, the final pose down was Zane, Corney, and Coe in the under 200-pound class, and Waller, Robbie, and Tinerino in the over 200. At first glance, it was evident that Frank presented an almost complete package this year and came in just as shredded, if not more shredded, than the year before. Even though some experts overlooked him as someone who was too small and not imposing enough to stand against guys like Robbie and Ferrigno, this year he changed perceptions with his flow and symmetry that were entirely different to his contemporaries.
I'm standing on stage in that year he decided not to go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. They want to announce the winner first. So I'm standing on stage in Montana and I'm thinking, please, universe, please give me a sign right now so I can know that I won and act more like the winner. Right now. And at that moment, the judge walks past like this and says, saying first.
Everyone else eats sandwiches and seems fine. But you're not everyone. That sandwich.
This is the moment you've been waiting for.
Oh yeah, after all these years, it's really great to win. What I've been after for so long.
With his first title secured, Frank was now ready to go all in on bodybuilding and begin his reign.
I applied for sabbatical leave, then I just didn't go back after that. 8 years I was teaching. I retired from teaching school and just beefed up my mail order courses and lived as a professional bodybuilder.
After the win, Frank received a lot of criticism from some sections of the bodybuilding press, who felt that he wasn't big enough to deserve the title. Many were also surprised that the pre-contest favorite, Robbie Robinson, didn't win. After all, he fit the mold set by previous winners like Arnold and Sergio Oliva. Realizing his particular strengths, Frank decided to double down on his conditioning and compete 3 pounds lighter than the year before. In reviewing the photos of his victory the previous year, Frank felt that he was actually in better muscular shape in 76.
And one of the things you also did, Frank, that I read in your book was your wife Christine would take pictures of you all the time, and you would analyze the pictures, and you said this is something that very few other bodybuilders do, right? You were one of the few people that really knew what you looked like when you went into a show.
And I studied the photos. I saw myself from every angle.
So I wanted to be more muscular in 78, and I was. And more definition, especially my legs.
And I was ready to quit in 78 just to retire after that. But I was hanging around with powerlifters at that time, sort of motivated me to compete again, and I did. And I think it was like 13 weeks before the show, I really made my decision to enter again.
The 78 Olympia was the 3rd consecutive Mr. Olympia contest promoted by Arnold and Lorimer. Each year they promoted the show. It grew in prestige, quality, and the number of competitors, which rose to 13 this year. Some new faces were making their first appearance, like Danny Padilla, Cal Sikalik, Roy Callender, and Mohammed Makawi. Others were making a return, like Boyer Coe, Ed Corney, Dennis Tinorino, and of course, Robbie Robinson. At the finals, it came down to Frank, Boyer, and Danny in the under 200-pound class, and Robbie, Roy, and Cal in the over 200. After his successful 3rd place finish last year, the audience was shocked that Ed Corney didn't make the pose down. But it was no surprise when Danny Padilla was called out for 6th place. The 5'2" giant killer was in good shape, but he was lacking in conditioning. But when the crowd favorite and the wild card of the contest, Cal Sikalik, was announced in 5th place, chaos erupted. Just 1 year earlier, the Hungarian had created an upset when he beat Mike Menzer at the Mr. Universe contest in France, and he was making his Olympia debut after 6 competitions where he was undefeated. Taking in the booze, he came up with one of the most unique responses to a poor decision at a bodybuilding contest. Stretching both arms out to his side, Cal let his head fall over to one of his massive shoulders and he closed his eyes. Crucified. Cal was letting his fans know that the judges and the powers that be had crucified him in front of the biggest group of bodybuilding fans all year, unaware of the lawsuit against Joe Weider after a fight they had earlier, or the attempted launch of a pro bodybuilders union. The hardcore bodybuilding fans couldn't understand why this magnificent bodybuilder with more beef than anyone on stage could be relegated to 5th place. Boyer Coe was in great shape. He was much more ripped than the year before, but took 4th place for the 2nd year in a row. Roy Callender, who placed 2nd to Robbie at the Night of the Champions earlier this year, came in astounding shape. With huge chest, back, and arms, he was one of the biggest competitors on stage, but couldn't match the top guys and took 3rd in his very first Mr. Olympia. Almost like an instant replay of the previous year's show, Frank's main rival was Robbie Robinson, who was in outstanding condition. In contrast to last year, when he appeared somewhat bloated Robbie came in much leaner and more ripped. However, Frank had dramatically improved upon his 1977 condition. His form was amazing, and his physique was chiseled to the bone, with every muscle being visible on stage. In the end, symmetry and deep cuts triumphed over overwhelming size again. But next year, another challenger was rising, and he was going to push the defending champ to his limits.
Well, here's the man we feel is the favorite going in, Mike Mencer of the United States, and he's
The 1978 Mr. Universe, staged in Acapulco, Mexico, witnessed the 27-year-old, 215-pound Mike Mencer's heavyweight class win with the first perfect score ever recorded in IFBB history. 3 months later, he started his pro career by winning the Southern Professional Cup in Florida, and then got second place to Robbie Robinson at the Pittsburgh Pro Invitational, followed by a third place finish behind Robbie and Danny Padilla at New York's Night of Champions. The rookie sensation, high-intensity trainer was certainly the talk of bodybuilding.
File your taxes 100% free in the app if you didn't use us last year. Just file with TurboTax Do-It-Yourself by February 18th. All tax forms and tax situations. Make the switch to TurboTax Do-It-Yourself and file free by February 18th.
Progress is a philosophy, a choice, a reason to keep going. Introducing the next generation of Tonal. We took the smartest, most effective strength training system in the world and made it stronger. Now lift up to 250 pounds of adaptive weight. Feel the perfect blend of cardio and strength training. And build muscle up to 2 times faster. This is progress that powers progress. Tonal Power Progress.
Out from the cover of the October Muscle Builder as the bodybuilding world congregated in Columbus for the biggest show of the year. Another name shaking the bodybuilding world at the time was the AAU Mr. America and NABA Mr. Universe winner Chris Dickerson, who was making his Olympia debut this year, which substantially heated up the competition. Coming off his 2 victories, Frank was favored, but the competition was stiff. To add mass, he'd been training heavier as he had to contend again with Robbie Robinson, the heavyweight winner both previous years, who moved down to the lightweight division this year.
Actually, I think probably the toughest was Robbie Robinson. Yeah, he was really the greatest. I think he had a fantastic physique, but I don't think he was that confident when he got on stage, and I think he was a little bit psyched out at me.
This year's contest featured 15 competitors, the largest lineup to date, and the under 200-pound class had swelled to 10 competitors, including Zane, Coe, Padilla, Robinson, and Dickerson. The giant killer wasn't going to slay any giants tonight, as he came in smooth and wasn't in good enough shape. And the same went for Robbie, who was off his usual shape and didn't look as good as last year. He lacked the density he had at his best, when he was a few pounds heavier. Chris looked marvelous, with his polished shape and symmetry, along with his renowned calves, but his arms looked slightly smaller in such famous company. Boyer was in the best shape of his life. Rumor had it that he sold his lucrative health club in Louisiana just to train in California for this contest. He was so defined and cut that even Arnold said to Chris Lund at the show, "Look at the Boyer. I've never seen him looking so cut up." Frank was something else, however. He was reported to be bigger by 8 pounds from last year, yet peeled. He'd sacrificed the tempting cash prize of the pro circuit during the past year, as he believed he could only peak once or twice for a contest. And for him, that contest had to be the Olympia. This year, his chest was splintered, his spinal erectors were striped, and his obliques were diced. His signature vacuum pose was the best pose in the contest, and made for the most iconic picture of his career. It was my opinion now that the title was between Coe or Zane, and I thought that Coe had the edge over Zane in overall contest condition, reported Chris Lund. The over 200-pound class featured half as many competitors as the under 200, and they marched on stage led by Roger Walker, then Bob Birdsong, Mike Mencer, Dennis Tinerino, and Roy Callender. Winner of 3 pro shows this year and second in last year's Olympia, Roy Callender was, on paper, the favorite. However, in that first year of a loaded IFBB Pro League schedule, he'd entered every previous show, all 8 of them, peaking for one after the other, as well as traveling frequently. On top of that, he was injured and looked smooth on stage. Roy's stumble allowed Roger Walker and Dennis Tinerino to move up 3rd and 2nd respectively. The name on everyone's lips this year, however, was Mike Mentzer. The rookie juggernaut was densely developed at 5'8", 220 pounds, and looked so confident he couldn't help but throw a couple of muscular poses every now and then with the shouts of heavy duty coming from the audience. Mike dominated the over 200 class, but the question was, would he have enough fine detailing to overtake Frank in the finals?
Right before me was Mike Mentzer, who was my competition. You know, they didn't compare us in the prejudging. They just gave us points, and I had 299 points out of 300, and he had 300 points. And they told me that before the evening show. It was me or Mike Mentzer. Mike didn't have the experience. I knew I would beat him easily. Even though he was ahead at prejudging, it doesn't matter. I'm going to wipe him out on Jose.
I never thought that he was that formidable of a competitor. He wasn't a great poser. He was sort of clumsy, and I knew that I would beat him. I didn't have any doubt in my mind.
I would shoot his shot, and he'd look over at me and hit the same pose, and I'd say, oh, that's perfect. It's called follow the leader. He came up pretty fast, and I knew that. The fact that he didn't have the experience I did, whenever I thought about that, I'd think, well, here's a guy who's maybe been in 10 contests, and I've been in 100. And so when I stand next to him, I'm going to outshine him, and I did.
The 6 finalists were Boyer, Chris, Mike, Robbie, Dennis, and Frank. All eyes were on the reigning champ and the fast-rising Mike.
Though.
And symmetry. Chris, Dennis, and Robbie finished 6th, 5th, and 4th respectively, and seemed to take the results well. But when Boyer was announced 3rd, the pain and anguish seemed to hit his face as he was pleading to the audience that he'd been robbed. According to the Lund report, at this moment, Mike looked at Frank and said, well, it looks like you've come in 2nd. And if both men had looked the same as they did during prejudging, this statement might have held true. However, Mike wasn't the same. He'd smoothed out. As a result, Frank won his 3rd straight title, cementing his status as the face and physique of the lightweight era. 4 was the goal, but the following year didn't hold 1, but 2 roadblocks. It's not your fault that you won, Mike said to Frank after the contest. Many still thought Mike should have gotten the nod. They wanted the lightweight era to be over, and for the ultimate bodybuilding title to go to someone who built a bigger physique rather than a sculpted one. Addressing these criticisms, Frank wrote in the February 1980 issue of Muscle and Fitness magazine, I don't think these people understand that though I don't have the massiveness they think I should have to be doubly good in every other way. Proportion, shape, and presentation to make up for it. But as the 1980 Olympia approached, these criticisms were the last thing on Frank's mind. 2 months before the contest, he'd suffered a freak injury that not only threatened his participation, but also his life.
It was 8 weeks before the Olympia, going through the pool, incredible shape. I mean, just right where I had to be, and I was being extremely angry because I was thinking, oh God, another 8 weeks of torture. I hate this. My life is nothing but doing this. Oh God, I hate my lightweight lawn chair, and it slid into the pool, and there was a lip that stuck out on the edge of the pool, and I hit the lip in the area between my legs, behind my testicles, and smashed my urethra. And blood was gushing out of my penis. I had a catheter put in, and I lost about a good 10 pounds of body weight. Before that happened, I was like 208 pounds and really solid, and that would have been incredible if that didn't happen. But basically, that's what I had to contend with.
To make things worse, unbeknownst to all competitors, something was happening behind the scenes that was going to mark this year's contest as the most controversial in the sport's history.
In 1980, they decided to let Paul Graham from Australia promote the show. So now for the first time since Arnold retired, he wasn't going to be promoting it. So that summer, he starts training very seriously at World's Gym. Him and Franco and Joseph Wilcox from Germany, they were all working out together.
Yeah.
And then people were like, man, what's going on with Arnold? Is he getting ready for the Olympia? Because he's not promoting it this year.
Yeah.
He said, no, they're going to finally start filming Conan. So that's the reason he said he was in good shape. And then the story was that Franco tried to convince him, and he said, man, just go in and win the show. So he never told anybody. And then, of course, Frank Zane used to go to Arnold every year before the contest, and he would pose for Arnold. And he'd say, what do you think? And Arnold would always give him good advice,
You asked Arnold for his advice on competing. Did Arnold actually reveal his intentions to compete then when you asked?
No, we didn't. I asked him. I had just had the accident. I was recuperating from it, and I said, you heard what happened? He said, yeah. I said, are you going to compete? He says, no, I'm going to be there, but I'm going to do the color commentary for CBS. And I said, well, what would you do if you were me? Before that, I would go to him, like a lot of other bodybuilders would too, and do my posing routine and ask his critique of it. And he'd be very detailed and tell me exactly what wasn't there or what needed to be there. And so I just trusted him as being that way. And so he said, you should go to Australia and defend your title. And so I did.
Yeah, I've been taking care of this field for 20 years.
There we go.
And for 20 years, I've asked myself the same question. Why do the field goalposts look like two crispy golden fries?
You've been thinking about that for 20 years?
No, my son-in-law thinks the game was invented.
For the first time in 4 years, the Olympia was moved from its comfortable home of Columbus, Ohio, to the unfamiliar settings of Sydney, Australia. But what was even more unfamiliar was the person going home with the Sandow. Seemingly only in Sydney to do commentary for CBS, Arnold showed up at the competitors' meeting and announced he's participating this year. This surprise entry had accomplished what he intended. It rattled the competition and threw everyone off guard. As a proponent of psychological warfare, Arnold always took every chance he could to intimidate and psych out his competition. During the meeting, he disrupted discussions about the rules, attempting to bring the spotlight onto himself, and belittled competitors, which caused a fight to break out between him and Mike Mentzer.
The biggest problem was, since 1974, they started having two divisions in the Olympia. They had an under 200-pound class and an over 200-pound class. So Boyarko went to Ben Weider and he said, from now on, why don't we just have one class? So Ben Weider said, yeah, that makes sense. So they took a vote with all the competitors, and all 16 competitors said, yes, let's just have one class, except for Arnold. So Boyarko at the meeting said, well, Arnold, we all want to just have one class. Why do you want to keep having the two classes? So Arnold's sitting down and he looks at him and he goes, why don't you act like a man?
They're talking back and forth. Arnold said something to Mentzer about his stomach hanging way out all the time. And Mentzer lunged at Arnold. Bill Pearl broke it up. And I was there watching it. And I said, well, whatever.
So then after that, Arnold said, all right, it's fine, we'll have one class.
Why do you think Arnold decided to come back out of retirement?
In 1979, it was a great victory. And as I came off the stage, he comes over with his microphone and says, Frank, how does it feel to win Mr. Olympia for the third time? And I said, Arnold, it feels even better than when I beat you for Mr. Universe. And that made it on TV. Right after that came on TV, he calls me on the phone and he's screaming at me. I said, yeah, Arnold, the joke was on you for that. And so I think that's one reason why he competed the next year. He wanted to get even. He couldn't leave it at that.
The one thing that appeared to reassure competitors not to worry was that Arnold's conditioning was worse than all his previous Olympias. When the 16 competitors finally walked on stage at the Sydney Opera House Theatre, The audience showed their approval for the Austrian oak, but few expected him to win.
Mike Menser and a few other people said that that was the first time they really saw Arnold nervous at a contest. Samir Banu told me that when Arnold was training in the gym, in World's Gym that summer, he looked fantastic. He was getting big, and it looked like he was gonna, be almost like the Arnold Bowl. But I guess he hurt his shoulder because he only trained for 8 weeks, and when you have to push it that fast. So he ended up taking a shot of cortisone before he left for Australia. Then when he gets to Australia, he's holding all this water. So Franco looks at him and he goes, "What happened?" And he goes, "I took a shot of cortisone." And he goes, "You idiot!"
It was evident that Arnold wasn't at 100%. His chest, back, and biceps were as good as ever, but his legs, triceps, and midsection all lacked size and definition. And what he lacked in muscularity and leanness, he made up for with clever posing and distracting his competitors.
Did Arnold play games with you? Because there's a photo of you laughing and him telling you something in your ear.
I don't remember what he said. I think I said, "You gonna try to psych me out now, Arnold? I'm psycho." He was on stage, he was supposed to be doing compulsory poses, and he wasn't. He was doing whatever he felt like. And the judge, guy's name was Dennis Stowler, I remember, he told him, he says, "Arnold, do the compulsory poses that we called for." And Arnold ignored him and just kept doing whatever he wanted. He told him again, and then finally he told him the third time, he says, "Arnold, you're disqualified, get off the stage." Arnold didn't leave the stage, but that night, Dennis Stowler was disqualified as a judge and flew back to England.
Gonna eat healthy today. Start with oatmeal. Great. So why don't you feel great? Turns out oatmeal can make your glucose spike.
Five-time Mr. Universe Boyer Cole was at his all-time best. Although his structure was a little blocky and lacked in aesthetics, he'd exceeded his condition from the year before, and his arm poses were some of the best on stage. After dominating the Grand Prix competitions, Chris Dickerson was poised to upset the current king of bodybuilding. Standing at 5'6", he had the most completely developed physique on stage, with thick lats and traps that were superior to Arnold's, separated quads, perfectly shaped calves, and elegant posing. Last year's runner-up almost killed himself in preparation for his contest. Word was Mike Menser was a full 10 pounds bigger and even more ripped than last year. With some of the biggest legs and thickest arms on stage, Mike had no doubt in his mind that tonight would be his. Other challengers in phenomenal shape were Roy Callender, who was the thickest guy in the show with thick pecs, razor-sharp abs, and massive arms, and the hometown favorite, Roger Walker, who got the most applause next to Arnold. As was the case usually, the reigning champ had to be the favorite, especially since Frank would drastically improve year after year. This year, he was sharply defined, and his great structure and superior aesthetics set him apart from the rest of the competitors as always. But thanks to the accident, he'd lost a significant amount of muscle. When relaxed, he was hard to beat, but when he posed, especially from the side, he lacked thickness compared to the bigger bodybuilders. To call Arnold's competition stiff this year would be an understatement, and many put him as 4th or 5th.
Samir told me at the pre-judging, he not only was down in size, I think he was only like 217. His legs were real thin. He had the chest, he had the biceps, but a lot of his other body parts, like his triceps were down, his legs were real down, and he was also holding water. The other problem was the judges. A lot of the judges were friends of Arnold. Reg Park, of course, who was his idol, he was one of the judges. Albert Busak, who was like friends with Arnold since Arnold was a teenager, he was one of the judges. And they had a guy from Australia was supposed to be a judge. His name was Peter McCarthy. So then they replaced him, and they put this kid in place, who I guess had some controversy in Australia, and this kid loved Arnold.
In 6th place came Roger Walker, who looked good but was blocky and couldn't contend with the rest of the guys. When Mike Menser was announced in 5th place, he was infuriated and exclaimed bullshit while being handed the award. Boyer Coe, who was in the best shape of his life and described as absolutely out of this world by reporter Jack Neary, received 4th place. The defending champ's shape wasn't good enough to land him a runner-up spot this year, and he ended up in 3rd. When Chris Dickerson walked on stage to accept the runner-up position and Arnold was announced in 1st place, The boos crescendoed in disbelief at the decision.
You know, whether or not I should have won it's debatable. Arnold, geez, maybe 5th place. I think him winning, that was a gift. You know, I would put him as the winner. And after the show, Arnold went on stage, and all the people were assembled waiting for somebody to say something. And Arnold said to the audience, "This proves, once and for all time, that I'm the greatest bodybuilder of all time." And it was met by a resounding chorus of boos. He got booed off the stage, and I think he was very crestfallen after that.
Did Arnold ever tell you, though, why he deceived you?
Yeah. After the contest, I was having breakfast with him. Then I asked him about it. He said, he used a political analogy. He says, you know, if Jimmy Carter goes up to Reagan and says, "Reagan, this is exactly how I'm going to win the presidency," and he tells him everything that he's going to do. He said, Reagan would be a fool not to take advantage of that. He took advantage of it. Then he said the classic line, "Competition is about strategy, not friendship."
Did you feel resentment for that?
I still do.
In the wake of the controversy, Mike Mentzer completely retired, and some bodybuilders withdrew from smaller contests. It was rumored that Frank threw his trophy against the wall and broke it, but that wasn't the case. According to his blog, as he was picking up the trophy, the oil from his body had spread to the trophy and it slipped out of his hand, hit the floor, and fell apart. Arnold's win was criticized in magazines throughout the year, and before bodybuilding could recover from the Olympia fiasco, it was heading into yet another controversy the following year.
From Wahoo, a revolutionary indoor running experience where you just run and your feet second.
Boyer Coe, Mike Mentzer, Frank Zane, and Albert Beckles all said, "We're not going in 81, we're boycotting the show." Because they heard rumors that Franco was going in it. And they said, after what happened in 1980, we know Franco's going to win. It's guaranteed. And Dickerson at first said that he was going to boycott it, but then he figured, hey, I'm second, so I can win.
Their prediction turned out to be correct. The 81 Olympia witnessed Franco Columbu following in his best friend's footsteps and making a comeback of his own after a career-ending injury. Franco won the title with an inferior lower body and beat guys like Tom Platz, Danny Padilla, and Roy Callender, who were in the best shape of their lives.
Now, do you wish you would have won in 81 when Franco won?
I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have gone out in 81, because I would have wiped it out. Franco wasn't that good. He had a bitch kid, then give a leg. Yet he won. Fixed.
I wonder what the judges would have done if you would have came in better than ever, better than 79. I mean,
Determined to get back in the game and reclaim his title, Frank's set to come in bigger than he ever did in 1982, a decision he'd soon come to regret.
Second place, Frank Zane, USA.
Actually, in 1982 was the year that I was in London for the Mr. Olympia that year, and I came in too big. Everybody was saying to me, "You need to get bigger," so I said, "I'm going to weigh 200 for the show," and I did. But in paying attention to that number, I lost track of getting ultra defiant, and so if I was a little bit lighter and more defiant, I think I would have won that show easily, but I didn't. Now, there were years when I wasn't as confident, like 1982. I found myself on stage looking up, no, not to show that. I think I would look better if I was maybe 95. Yeah. I had this obsession to weigh 200. Yeah, I had really good definition and everything, but I was a little bit thicker through the middle of my body than I have been in the past. Now, not that I think that Dickerson was that good or deserved to win. He wasn't. It's just that Bill Pearl made a big difference. Bill was one of the judges in London, and London is like, Bill Pearl is God in London. He had a great deal to do with Dickerson winning. Bill was his coach. Chris Dickerson, I mean, the guy, he's so cocky that year I go to, fuck you. You're lucky to win. Lucky Bill Pearl was there as your mentor, putting a bug in everybody's ear for you.
The 1983 competition was supposed to be Frank's return to glory, but unfortunately, disaster struck.
And in 83, I was all set to do that, and I had a back accident tore my rotator cuff, and I trained with that. It prevented me from getting as big as I would have liked. And you know, in bodybuilding, especially with me, what it was is if judges see you big and muscular one year and then smaller the next year, it doesn't help you. you just get voted down. And so I was great in 1983. Incredible shape, definition, but I wasn't as big. I was thinking I want to win 4 Olympians, and I got the 4, but it was 4th place. And when I got that, I think, well, you know, that's it. That's my own. This is it. And it was. I realized that was the end of my career. I was 41. I saw the writing on the wall already. Lee Haney's placing ahead of me. You know, the new guy, big monster. I saw that's what it's going to be from now on. And I said, well, this is it. You know, I got to let go. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. It's like the change of life. When you start out, basically, you're working on building up your ego, and what you're actually doing is you're putting on a suit of armor to shield you from fear, and then with a layer of muscle. But that's your shield. That's bodybuilding as character armor. Nobody ever told me you can do it. You have everything it takes. Nobody ever told me that.
What we're doing is creating a perfect body. And it's a very elusive thing. It's a sport, it's an art form, it's a performing art, it's a beauty contest, it's all of these things.
Want to hand off your taxes? Get more from your tax expert and spend less. We'll beat what you paid your tax pro last year when you switch to a TurboTax full service expert. Start now.
Today's guest holds the incredible joint record of 8 Mr. Olympia wins from 1984 to 1991, retiring undefeated and beating the previous record set by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Passionate about the importance of both physical and spiritual growth, he's an incredible spokesperson for fitness at any age of your life. Today with his wife Shirley, he runs a youth charity to help support children at risk and guide them through the right path. He's also inspiring the older generations with his new book, Fit at Any Age. For a lesson in staying at the top of your game, and someone who's inspired me personally through my junior bodybuilding career, please welcome world champion bodybuilder, author and mentor Lee Haney to the Escape Limits podcast. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you. It's an honor being here.
And it's a real pleasure to sit down with someone who, through my younger years, I've looked at on pages of magazines and been inspired for a long time. So it's a real honour to do that.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.
One of the things I didn't know though, and tell me if this is true, is at 16, did you really stand on stage in your underpants and win a bodybuilding competition?
Yeah. You heard that one, didn't you? Yeah. It's true. You know, it's amazing. That was come from a small hometown called Spartanburg, South Carolina. You know, nobody knew what bodybuilding was. Only when you went to the YMCA, you saw guys there who was lifting, prehistoric weights.
Right.
And all these different gadgets hooked up. And so I wanted to enter my first show, which was in Winston, South Carolina. They didn't have a teenager at that time, so I was
motions, appearances, seminars, and so on. So I achieved that goal through the sport in the end.
Yeah. So, because we were talking off camera, there's some similarities. I was an aspiring junior bodybuilder, nowhere near to your level, but I guess one of the things that I didn't have at the time that you seemed to have at an early age was the drive and the determination to kind of take it so far. What do you think gave you that, based on, because there wasn't people around you that had probably done anything like that, were there?
I think it's somewhat genetic. Your personality, your basic personality is probably somewhat genetic, and then it's also influenced by your environment. So I lost my father when I was quite young, and then we moved to Birmingham just with my mum, and she married a new guy, and he also died quite quickly, so it was pretty tragic time.
Yeah.
And then my mum decided to leave Birmingham when I was 16, and I decided to stay. So I didn't have anywhere to stay. I was just staying at friends' houses and stuff like that. And being a teenager with my mates, we got into a bit of trouble. And at 18 years old, I was sent to a detention centre for a few months. And I'd already done a little bit of weights before when I was at school. And I'd done karate, and I'd done all the push-ups and squats in my room. I had a ball worker and all this. So I was already interested in that and physical. And when I was in this detention centre, you know, part of the process is hard physical exercise, which a lot of the kids didn't like, but I loved it, you know, and it was something for me to outlet, being in this place, to kind of escape for a while. And I was good at it. I was good at the circuit training. I was beating everybody on that. And then we had weight training, but it was more like powerlifting. So we just concentrate on bench press, squat, and deadlift. And again, there I was a couple of lads that were probably bigger and heavier than me, but I was as strong as them, and I already had what you could term as a physique-looking body. I had good abdominals, had good shape. So the foundation of a good physique was there. And even the prison officers noticed that. And they encouraged me when you get out of here, go and do powerlifting because you could be a good powerlifter. But I already knew that I wasn't interested in powerlifting. I was interested in bodybuilding because I've already seen the magazines from Joe Weider and I was familiar with some of the bodybuilders. So I was like, that's the route I want to go. So as an individual, I think I was already much more determined and tunnel vision than the average person. And then I had all this adversity around me and no real future. You know, I had no family around me, no qualifications from school, nobody there to advise or help. So my prospects were not that great, and I saw bodybuilding as a way to improve those prospects, if you like, and do something positive. And where exactly that was leading, when I started, I didn't know. But I knew I'm doing this, I'm going to give it 100% and something's going to be good from it. And maybe, I'd really like to be like British champion one day. Right. I think that's probably as far as I was thinking at that point, anyway.
Right, that was as far as your imagination.
Yeah, at that point could go, because that's what I'd gone to watch a British Championship and I saw the guys and like, they were great, maybe in a few years I can do that, and of course the story turned out differently.
Yeah. I heard that you originally, when you was with your father, you were sort of like in the countryside living, and then you came into like a council estate. Was that quite, thinking back, was that quite a shock to go from a change of life?
It was. I went from what we call a smallholding in England, which is not really a farm, but it's just, we got fields, you got stables, we had some horses there, dogs, chickens, ducks, this kind of thing. It was kind of idyllic upbringing for a kid. I had all this space. And my friends lived, 1 mile this way or 1 mile this way, and so on. So you got to ride your bike or you got to walk everywhere. So it's a good, healthy lifestyle. And then when my father passed away, we moved to Birmingham. It wasn't actually a council estate; it was okay. It was after 16, when my mum left. I was lived in quite a few places. Lived with friends on a council estate. Lived in Bedsit, and eventually, when I came from the detention centre. I didn't have anywhere to stay. The city housed me, council, as we say in England. So they gave me a council flat on a very notorious council estate in Birmingham called Castle Vale. And they offered me this place because not many people accept it and go there. But for me it was fine. So yeah, that's where I was living for probably 5 years when I started training. Right. So I was still living there. I remember getting to the point where I was British champion. I was British champion. I won the British Championship at Wembley. But I still came home to Castle Vale, to this council flat that had no carpet. I didn't have a proper bed. I had a mattress and an old TV. And I came back with my trophy and I put it on the top of this old TV. And I'm thinking, great, I'm British champion, but there's no newspapers outside. There's no TV. I haven't got a car. I've got no money. But I wasn't thinking this in a bad way. All my friends had cars and more material things, but I was happy because I had this goal that was all consuming. I was pursuing it and doing well at it, and I kind of knew that things were going to come. But at that point, British champion, but still broke.
Right.
So I distinctly remember that.
What were you like? What were your mates have said you were like as a teenager? Were you sort of fairly? Because I've looked at some of your videos and you almost look a little bit shy. Was that?
Yeah, I was not comfortable. I was shy. I was even thinking like, wow, getting on the stage in front of all these people, how's it going to be? But that was okay actually. When I got on stage, it felt like natural. It felt like it was my home. So, but talking to people, a lot of people that I didn't know and were not from my background, I was uncomfortable with, and definitely talking on camera very uncomfortable because I'd never been exposed to that. Even having my picture taken, it took me probably until after I retired from bodybuilding to be able to just smile for the camera. I couldn't smile. I was like, just take the picture, man. I can't smile unless I'm feeling like smiling. And right now I'm not feeling like smiling. So that was even Joe Wheeler tried to get me to smile. In the end, he's like, look, just let this guy do what he wants because that's what he's going to do. You know, in the end, they just accepted me, and that's pretty much the story. I do pretty much do things the way I want to do them. Yeah. So yeah. Shy kid, but already mentally much stronger than everyone around me, I believe. I stood out, and a few people that grew up with me when we were teenagers, they're like, it wasn't really a surprise for us that you did that, you know? It was in a way, but it wasn't, because you were always something different about you, always like more focused and determined. So yeah, that was the young Dorian, and over all this experience I've grown massively. I mean, you know, you learn to be comfortable talking to different people, you learn to be comfortable talking on stage on a microphone, and I can go and speak now with 2,000 or 3,000 people. It's not a problem, but I was, you know, initially I was terrified. I remember doing my first seminar when I think it was British champion or just before, and I was super nervous, and I, you know, prepared. I had all these notes and these cues and everything like that, and I did the job. But now if I do a seminar, I just, you know, I could be sleeping 5 minutes early and just get up and do it. It's second nature for me, and to talk to people and to talk on camera is not a big deal. So my personality grew massively from all this exposure and traveling and life experiences. You just get more confident.
Yeah. And do you think that's what it is, confidence? Because I spoke with Frank Zane actually. We did a podcast with him, and he mentioned that a lot of bodybuilders kind of it becomes a shield that they carry with them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's very difficult to let go of that and see what's inside. Does that
absolutely wasn't a problem for me. Like people say, oh, don't you miss those days when you're huge, and how do you feel like you're not as big and everything? Now I'm like, no, I don't miss it at all. And you know, for me it was not, as I said, I was in a detention centre when I was a teenager, and I had no problem with anybody because they could see I was stronger and bigger and tougher than average. So I didn't start bodybuilding from the point of view of I feel insecure, so I'm going to build myself up, and then I feel more secure and I'll feel better, and everyone will treat me differently. I did it as a pursuit, as a sport, and as a way to improve my life. And I almost viewed the physique, the body that I was building, as not being me. It was almost like a project, like a sculpture, something that was separate from me, and it needs to be like this, and it needs to be as massive as possible, as ripped as possible, and balanced. And that's the criteria, and that's what I need to present. Now, I'm no longer competing. Why do I need this massive sculpture now? I need my body now for functioning. I need to live inside this thing, I need to do things. And when you're at that massive body weight, it's not that functional. No. It's, you know, it's difficult to tie your shoelaces, let alone do yoga and you know, cycling up mountains and swimming and things that I enjoy doing now. So now I've got the body that I need for the life that I lead now. I need a functional body, a healthy, fit body that's going to give me a quality of life, and that's what I train for now. And I'm very proud of what I did in the past, and it's there. I did it, and I did it to the maximum, and nobody could do it anymore. So that chapter is now closed. Yeah. And if anyone's interested in bodybuilding and competing and training, then I will say there's nobody better and nobody with more knowledge in that area than me, and that's what I now give to other people that want to do it. But that training is not relevant for me now.
No. With the sort of bodybuilding as a sport, it's slightly different to business in some ways. I'm trying to sort of compare them together, but when I started bodybuilding, I had a belief that I could have been
you know, I could have been to, you know, certainly as a junior I believe they have potential, but with bodybuilding I've heard you say, you know, it's all about genetics, and you know, if you've not got the right genetics, you're wasting your time to compete. What was the point that you realised that you had the potential that you could make this something that was going to change your life, as opposed to just, you know, doing local competitions and things?
Well, fortunately, very, very quickly I got that feedback. Just to correct the statement, I think it's not all about genetics.
Right.
But if you haven't got the genetics to reach this potential, you won't.
Right.
But you could have the genetics to be Mr. Olympia, but the other input is not correct.
Okay.
Maybe you're not that dedicated, and you're missing some of the other factors. I believe some people I competed against, perhaps they had as good as or better genetics than me, but they didn't beat me because I had more input. I made the most of my genetics, so I maximised where maybe they didn't. So yeah, you can't be Mr. Olympia and without the correct genetics, and genetics are very important, but just because you have the best genetics doesn't mean that the outcome you will be number one, because somebody else could just be smarter and work harder and make up that difference.
Was there anyone you ever knew that probably had some really good genetics that, you know, if they'd have applied themselves like you, could have, you know, around that time may have been able to beat you, do you think?
Well, I did make a statement at the time about Flex Wheeler, because he was second to me in '93, and it was great, amazing potential. Not different physique to me in that he was very light, like his bone structure was very light, but very full, round muscle bellies, looked great. Well, just because I knew Flex not very well, but we were friendly and I knew him and I knew enough about him to know that he was not 100% all the time, whereas I was. So if he had been 100%, if he had done everything that I did, well, maybe a different outcome, but that wasn't the case, right? So potential is one thing, but maximising it's another.
And would you say that carries across in all areas of life and business that, you know?
Absolutely. It's like you're starting with some basic material of potential, and it's what you do with that's important. So if you've got great genetics, you might have a head start on somebody, but they might catch you up. If you're missing days, you're breaking your diet, you're not training quite as hard as you could do, you know, or you're letting life factors interfere. That's what I was very good at. I just totally shut off from everything, and like if my house is on fire, I'd call the fire brigade. What can I do about it? I'm still going to the gym. It's like that was literally it. I lived in a tunnel, which was pretty extreme, but trying to be the best in the world is pretty extreme, so you need extreme measures.
Before you started your, you know, I guess, accelerating bodybuilding career, did you, I've watched a lot of the anger that you put in, it seems anger or aggression here. Did you have anger as a sort of a young teenager that you were carrying with you?
Well, now I realise absolutely, yes I did. You know, my father died when I was young. Nobody really seemed to like help me with that. So I guess I was pissed off about that. And then my mum left and I was left in Birmingham on my own. Maybe I was pissed off about that, and just being a teenager you're pissed off anyway. So so yeah, I had this that I could call on. Anger and like determination to like show everybody. That was a lot of it. I'll fucking show you. Yeah, I'll use that energy. I'm going to show you what I can do. So that I always, until I was Mr. Olympia, and something I struggled with a little bit initially, I always had this underdog thing. Like I'm the underdog and nobody like thinks I can do it, so I'm going to fucking show you, I'm going to do it. So I use it I call it fuck you energy. You know, I use some fuck you energy in the workout. So there's a combination of anger and determination and like wanting to show the world that, you know, I'm worth something, I guess.
Yeah. I guess that's in a positive way, because I suppose, you know, as a teenager you can easily put that fuck you energy into fucking other people up.
Well, a lot of people do that. That's what happens, and that was kind of the phase I was in a little bit when I was a teenager. You know, I was a skinhead. All my mates were skinheads or punks, and that was the environment I was in. So quite often a few little
fisticuffs and so on going on there. You've got a bunch of angry kids, and this is early 80s. If you remember, early 80s in Britain was not a great time. There's a lot of unemployment. There's not much for people to do. So drinking and fighting was kind of like a British pastime, really.
The Huggies Skin Essentials diaper helps protect skin from ick and stick that can cause rash. We got you, baby.
The big game is coming, and there's no good time to use the bathroom. So we're giving you a connectivity. Turn a commercial into a bathroom.
Yeah, do you think for younger people, like I suppose we're talking to a lot of people that are in the fitness industry, how important is it, do you think, to try and sort of channel young kids that may be from that area into some kind of sport or fitness or bodybuilding?
I think it's great. You just put you got all this excess energy, and you put it into something positive now. Instead of putting it into something negative, it's just energy. So I think sports are a great way to channel that. And they say sports is like sanitized warfare almost anyway, so it's taking the place of that and letting that, giving a good outlet for that energy, a positive outlet.
I certainly see that. We've interviewed some people from all different areas, and it seems as though if you've not got something to focus your mind, and even now I'm sort of, I'm 48, the times where I've not got something to occupy myself, I then start looking for, not trouble, but...
You're looking for stimulus. Your brain's looking for stimulus, and it might be not a good, positive outcome for you, the stimulus. That's what it is, I think.
And when, in terms of your focus when you were competing then, how did you do that? Were you sort of, you had this vision of British Championships, and did you write things down? Did you have a kind of a wall of like posters of people you wanted to follow? How did you get that control? Because I guess
absolutely. I think, and I tell people all the time, whatever it is, your training, business, even relationship, anything, write things down. If you've got a goal or a promise to yourself, write it down on a piece of paper and sign it. Like, I intend to stop smoking, and I'm going to stop today, and write your name, and it's there, right? So I did that with bodybuilding. I had break it down into, first of all, I got every workout that I ever did from 1983 to 1997 logged down. Every exercise, every rep, every weight, everything was written down. So every workout I used to write it down, and then I would write down short-term goals, which usually were a month. Okay. Long-term goals were 12 months, which is usually, with me at some point, it was ending with a contest, right? So I'd write down a few things like body weight, a few key exercises like bench and squat and deadlift and curls, whatever, write them down. This is what I'm doing now. This is the goal for next month. Reasonable, achievable goals. Like, if you're going to put something ridiculous that you can't achieve, then it's not going to help you. It's going to demotivate you. So little goals, little steps. But all the journeys that we make are made of little steps. So let's say that you want to climb this mountain, Mount Everest. If you can see the top, you probably can't see it, but let's say you can see the top. It's just so far away, it's daunting, right? So why don't you concentrate? Yeah, I will get to the top one day, but first of all, I will get to that ledge there. And when I get to that ledge there, I will get to that ledge there. And let me focus on that. So breaking it down into little achievable goals. So it might have been, I don't know, let's go back, I was bench pressing 200 pounds for 8 reps. My goal for next month might be 210 pounds for 8 reps, or 205. They don't seem a lot. But if you added 5 pounds every month to your bench press for a month, it would be 60 pounds at the end of the year. So that would be a big increase. And of course, diminishing returns, the bigger and stronger you get, and the more advanced, the smaller those goals, the gains are going to be. Right. So I think it's important to have a long-term goal and break that into small, achievable steps to get there. So you got the big one, but you're focused on the little ones that are keeping you focused. If you just focus on the big one, you'll get daunted and you'll get distracted. So break it down into little steps.
How often did you used to look at your short and long term goals?
I used to sit down Like I used to take 10 or 15 minutes before I went to the gym, to drive to the gym. I'll sit down in my house, in a quiet place, and I'll get out my log and I'll look what I did last week. And I'll look at the goals and look what I did last week. That's what I did last week. So I did 200 pounds on the bench press for 8 reps. Today I must do 9. That's my goal. It's solid, it's there, it's in my head, and I go into the gym. I know what I'm doing. I know what my goal is. Most people wander into the gym. Oh, I'm doing chest today, a little bit of chest there. With no real goals in mind. You're not going to get very far doing that. I've got this observation I make with people in the gym. So when you start training, it's a stimulus that you're not used to. So you will react, yeah? But pretty soon your body will get used to that level of stimulus, and that's when you've got to really push it, and you've got to have a plan. And most people don't have that. So you see them progress for the first year, maybe 18 months, and that's pretty much it. They don't really move after that. They're just going to be spinning the wheels because they haven't got this structure in place, they haven't got the goals. If you haven't got the goals, you're not going to push yourself. You know, to push yourself to real failure, which is what I recommend that people do for a limited amount of sets, short, hard workouts, it's fucking uncomfortable. It's going to hurt. You're going to be out of breath. You're going to feel nauseous. Most people that train with me first time, they vomit. It's that extreme. So why are you going to do that to yourself? Why are you going to push through that? Because you've got a goal that's very important. Otherwise, when you get uncomfortable, your normal reaction is, fuck this, I'm stopping. You need the goal to push you through that pain. So my goal is greater than the temporary discomfort that I'm going to experience. Right. And I know that. So I'm going to go through that discomfort because I want the goal greater than I want to feel comfortable. Yeah. It's basically like that.
Was it when you were thinking about those things, like your motivation, was it a motivation to get away from where you were at the moment, or was it like a motivation on where you were going to?
It was a motivation purely on the physical, on the training, on the body, on the outcome. Right. The rest would fall into place. Right. That's what I was thinking, you know. And you're asking me how long did it take for me to realise that I got what it takes. I had been training for 18 months. 18 months I've been training, prepared for my first contest, which was a novice contest, West Coast Championships in Morecambe. I think we were on the other coast, so I think we were competing in the juniors. West Coast in Morecambe, novice contest. I remember going there and pumping up backstage and I'm thinking, a couple of good lads here, right? I reckon I might be better than that. That was it, yeah? I went on stage, I posed, I came off, and everyone was just freaking out. I had Ron Davis there, who was the head of the IFBB in England, and he judged at the Mr. Olympia. And him and some other judges were just freaked, like, where do you come from? Well, I come from Birmingham. Why are you in a novice class? I'm like, because I'm a novice, I haven't competed before, I don't think I'm good enough for the heavyweights. They're literally almost laughing. Not good enough for the heavyweights, eh? Well, let me tell you something, kid. You're better than all the heavyweights we've got in the country right now. You're the best heavyweight we've got, mate. Well, I couldn't really take it in at first. So he said, look, in 2 weeks' time, or a week's time, I think it was a week's time, there's the World Games in London, which is, World Games is like Olympic Games, but the sports are not yet accepted into Olympic Games. So they had bodybuilding there, and this was a world championship level.